I'm Lola.
And I'm Mamuna. Together, we've a combined 35 years of experience within the tech scene in North America and Europe.
We talk about the highs, the lows, the WTFs of navigating the technology industry and answer your questions about navigating tech careers.
This is Lost in Tech.
How are you, my love?
I'm pretty good. I feel like the thick of January. The allure of summer is just floating over my head. Somewhere warm is calling my name right now. Like, just go.
You need a break.
I need a break. I need a sunshine break. How about you?
I'm good. Today is the last day of January, and it feels like the 100th day of January.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it's about damn time. Like, we are done with this month. But it's funny you talk about summer because we have had no sun in Toronto. I think there was, as of last week, there was an article saying that through the months of November, December, and January, to the point of the article, Toronto had about 30 hours of sun.
Oh, that's so sad.
I just wanted to cry.
Do you have one of those lights?
I don't have one of those lights. But I then started laughing because do you know what my social media showed me? And I actually should have mentioned this earlier, but I just connected it to the sun. It showed me Black women using self-tanner to emulate sun glow. I am not even kidding. I am not
I would like to know what brand that is.
This is what the comments were saying. This woman was like, she was like, look, there's not enough sun. My skin's looking hella pasty. This is not what my vibe is.
Where is this a problem?
In Canada, because there's no sun. So we are all looking pale under our melanin, and our melanin is not switched on. We're not getting glow. We're going to have to apply a ton of products or grease up the face, or
apply that grease, girl.
Self-tanner. No, I am
no. You guys better get some Vaseline or something else.
My algorithm was showing me after I was complaining about sun is Black women applying self-tanner to their skin. There's actually a British woman who is doing it as well, which makes a lot of sense because the UK never gets sun. But Toronto typically does have sun. And so this is quite depressing winter right now.
That's different.
Hey,
that's different.
You know, something for everyone. We appropriate forwards, backwards, sideways, in every direction, and we find a use for everything. I never thought I would see Black women using self-tanner.
Yeah.
Not like light skin.
I didn't know
Black
they
women.
made
my complexion darker.
Suntan, what is it called? Not suntan. It's like
self-tanner.
Self-tanner, yeah. I didn't know they made that for our complexion.
But it's not like makeup. It like switches on. It's like a chemical reaction for your skin, right? That lasts a certain time. Yes. These are the things you learn. So you put it on and then you leave it on and then you're supposed to wash it off and it leaves behind an effect on your skin. And that's what a lot of obviously white women use to look a little bit sun-kissed. And now Black women, we're here too. We're trying to emulate the missing sunshine on our skin.
So are you considering?
No.
No. We'd have to have a discussion.
This is
offline. We'd have to talk.
I miss the sun, but I think I miss it more for the emotional and chemical needs. The look of the sun would be nice, but I'm okay not having that while I'm not experiencing any sunshine. I'm good.
It's just the deep breath you get when you're like, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Welcome me outside. Exactly. Kiss my face.
Just kiss my face. But while we're on the topic, social media. So obviously last time we were talking about enabling the supervillains, our favorite topics of Trump and Elon Musk. But I came across a study of data on social media that actually had me thinking, holy shit, it's way worse than that, right? So we'll put the link in the show notes. This article was basically analyzing how perspectives became more progressive with each generation. And so the, boomers are less progressive than, say, millennials, right?
Yeah.
But the data from a recent survey shows that in almost every country in the world that they studied, and they studied Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere, developing and developed nations, the Gen Z, who are just a little bit younger than us, and then Gen Alpha, our children, are becoming less progressive than millennials. So millennials were the last generation to show a progressiveness trend. Gen Z is actually not. And then Gen Alpha is potentially less. And then the gap between boys and girls is huge. So girls are still kind of more progressive, but boys are becoming massive.
It's like 30-point difference. It's almost, in most cases, a 30-point difference between the two.
I was literally stunned.
And the largest difference was South Korea, which I thought was interesting. But once I read into it, you see how it became that way. But it's so interesting to see it in numbers.
The numbers scare me because I feel like, okay, I guess, our bias is going to show. We are very liberally minded, right? So this podcast is not where you're going to find your most conservative points of view. No. But as a Black female who is living her best life now, I really appreciate the evolution in thought that has happened over the last 50 years, because without it, I would not be thriving, frankly, right? And so I am the product of progressive mindsets in generations, sequential generations. The idea that my daughter is going to be surrounded by a bunch of old school traditionalist boys who haven't got a flipping clue why those traditions were the way they were 50, 60, 70 years ago, and that her career or her ability to thrive is limited because she does not have choice over her body, or she cannot find a partner who's actually not expecting her to flipping stay in the kitchen.
Like stay home. Yeah.
Like, they want traditional wives, but they still want you to work. I'm like, dude.
It's very... It's really interesting. I mean, in the article, they talked about how, or they're theorizing how potentially the Me Too movement was like a point in the data to show that the women sort of were becoming more empowered, vocal, and then young men potentially in this space were becoming more threatened and retreating back to more traditional values, more conservative values. And it's interesting because you see that also in content across social media.
This is where we're the supervillains, Mamuna.
Yes.
This is it because...
Yeah, because what we see, or what a young woman would see versus what a young man would see, are very, very different things. I remember a year ago, or maybe half a year ago, the Andrew Tate content took off. And all
Tater
these...
tots.
Yeah, I haven't heard that. That's amazing.
Tater tots.
Oh my gosh. But this guy was online spewing to me, in my point of view, the craziest content and how he thought about women. And all these young men were parroting his words, whether they were joking or they were serious. They were still listening and consuming his point of view. Yeah. And those were things like this guy was teaching young men how to mold their thinking at such a young age and perspective around women. Yeah. And then you see all these younger women repulsed. Like, how could he say that? What's he saying? You see older women, everybody's repulsed. But
a lot of women aren't as well. There were some young women who were supporting Andrew Tate as well. And that was also a shock to me because I was like, the heck? And they were young.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's probably there's
a lot.
There's probably there's probably a lot in that. And I don't know if we should go down that rabbit hole, but
no.
It's so interesting because the divide creates now space for people like Tate to gather up the mind space, the mind share of these young men by spewing very polarizing views online. And there's no role model on the other side to say, hey, that's not right. You shouldn't do that. This is how, that's not what gets its views.
So and like I did some digging into like, okay, let's ignore the perspectives I don't agree with. How did we get here? And I think there's like, it's a spectrum, right? There's, in a lot of jobs that I have worked at and continue to work at, we talk a lot about personalization and relevance, and the idea that, people want stuff that's valuable to them, which means it's much more personalized to them. And so you're building with algorithmic intent to give you this kind of like one-on-one experience. But the side effect of that is what I see and what you see no longer overlap. And when you have gender issues and race issues, I will become more affirmed by seeing content that seems to serve me. And I am less exposed to content that challenges my perspectives. Whereas, say, I remember growing up, with my friends, we would watch The Wonder Years on TV. And The Wonder Years, the original one, not the remake that I missed and now apparently is cancelled. But like they had challenging themes, but you would watch it together. You would watch it, my brother was sat next to me and we would talk about it. And so you would process progressive thinking in a much more collective way. Whereas now you're only getting affirmations, and it's all the underlying, it's almost like we're starting with like good intent, but we've ended up in this place where there's just there's a social impact on what happens. And I'm like, this is Gilead in the making, Yeah.
I mean, really, there's money in personalization. There is stickiness in personalization.
Yeah. The content is better. That's how we perceive it.
And so when we think about tech, it's only going to keep pushing in a direction. And we may get like, I know Instagram was thinking about like content shown to different age groups and things like that. You may get some folks kind of like touching the area, but they're not going to push too hard in an opposite direction, because that would be undoing the years of research and work that they've already moved forward with. So I don't actually know what the counter is. And I mean, you could have people go on social and try to be the adult in the room and have these conversations that speak to this like both groups to try to pull them together. But I'm sure that is not going to be the thing that people openly and willingly consume. They may hear it and react to it, but they're not going to be open-minded to be able to understand what is being said by the other.
Yeah, I think the challenge comes back to, Gen X and Gen Y parents. Like, we have to parent very intentionally. So when I saw that article initially, I sent it to my sister, who has 2 boys. I sent it to a bunch of my friends, and I was like, yo, we need to raise our boys very, very carefully in this landscape, right? Like, we need to be talking to them with high intent and explaining things, because you will accidentally end up with a child who is a tater tot. And that is a completely opposite value to you as a parent. And girls, we also need to be speaking to our girls, because, there were some things in there around, there's a rise in pro-life thinking in Gen Z and Gen Alpha. Again, it is not about my personal opinion, but I think the implications of that are less choice for women, right? The pro-life mantra removes choice. And as a woman raising a girl child, I don't want her life to have less choice than my life had. And there are so many of these topics where, like, we've almost got to interrupt how our kids are going to experience tech to try and qualify the mental models that they're developing on a regular basis. I was telling my goddaughter the other day to delete her Instagram, because it's clear her algorithm was showing her content that was highly inappropriate. And I was shocked to hear some of the stuff that she was being suggested. And I was like, dude, something's gone wrong. You clicked on the wrong thing. Reset. You hovered on the wrong comment. If you don't care about that list, I suggest you completely delete that account, get a new email address. But I'm not even confident that would work. Like, they might sniff out enough about her historical stuff that they're still going to show her problematic content for
or it might be
a teenager.
based on her network of people. Like you never know what the algorithm is
But it's almost like
to.
for her to now, and we were talking about she's got to break the algorithm and remake it. I was like, I'll send you a bunch of like super wholesome profiles to follow. So you're not like she was being shown suicidal thinking and like really dark imagery for a teenager. And I was just like, what is this content that shows up on your feed? And she's like, yeah, auntie, I don't know. It's always there every time I open it. I think I'm going to come off Instagram. And I was like, don't just come off, like delete.
Right, delete.
So yeah, it's pretty scary. And I think our parenting has to adjust for this reality. Yeah. The survey was quite stark.
Yeah. I mean, I think about like South Korea. I keep going back to South Korea because that divide is so significant, and they're seeing declining birth rates, declining rates of marriage. Like they're already seeing the effects. And the article was talking about how like South Korea is a warning for rest of the world,
other countries.
Yeah. And so I mean, I don't know, like I'd be curious to kind of do some more research to see if South Korea has already started to implement or think about this as a problem, and if they've been able to pinpoint opportunities to reverse the trend. But it was saying that once people get into like their late 20s, like early 30s, they're stuck like that. That's sort of where they are for life. And so the opportunity to act is pretty small. It's a pretty small window.
Very
and you have to be
window.
Pretty decisive in how you're going to target, the groups and what you're going to say, what you're going to do, because you do risk alienating or pushing individuals away, right? Because you don't understand. So it's like you really have to be able to speak the language. That means that even if you hold an opposite view, you have to understand and come from a place of like foundational learning. Like, I hear you. I see the merits in what's being said. Let's explore this world
what
together,
that means.
Yeah.
That's what my friend was saying. She said she's going to have a whiteboard over the dinner table with her son so that every night at dinner, they'll be like, what would you like to discuss? And let's write our ideas up and like, almost have a rolling agenda of topics to... Because I do agree, it's not that we need to produce children or generations that are automatons who think what their parents think.
Exactly.
But I think it's the awareness. And I think if we think about the dynamic shifts, it's almost like the tech is creating the problem from a place of different intent. And we have to use social methods to almost come back, to pull that back and undo it. But it's scary to me. It's very scary.
I think the challenge also is, with the tech, you have your phone or your iPad or your computer, whatever it is, and you yourself are consuming the content. It's not the community is consuming the content with you in a sense, right? So no one else has your feed.
Yeah.
So let's say you as a parent or you as whoever, a caregiver, is trying to work with your child or work with someone in helping them understand openness and, create more like softer views, maybe.
Yeah.
You're doing that in silo again. Like it's almost like, again, this walled garden that you are now taking on. And then at some point they're going to leave your walled garden and go out into the world.
Yeah.
And they now may become like an individual voice that is not heard because their view is different, or they have a different way of thinking, or maybe all that you did is undone. Who knows, but it really has to be that. I think that it has to be like this awareness that it's more than just a parent. It's like the community of people have to understand that there is detriment to extreme views, and there's detriment to how technology could proliferate and share that content. And so we kind of have to make it the space where there's good in understanding. I don't know, like you go on social media and just like all the content where a person's like, hey, let's learn about all the things and let's approach them.
Well, so I have an
calmly.
answer for this, actually. I have an answer for this. And I'm going to stand on my soapbox.
Okay.
So I believe I'm struggling to believe that this feature is because of this person. But anyway, I actually think X might make it through in the long term because of this one feature that I am now really appreciating, which is like a community response. So occasionally as you're going through X these days, you will increasingly find these boxes. It's like the community would like to add some context to what you're observing. And so it shows up around ads. This is a drop shipper and the quality is low. It shows up around this particular article, in fact, that we're talking about, had community notes. And what it does is, obviously that could be used maliciously. What it does is it introduces the idea that there is a debate to be had about the thing that you are consuming. And I think it should be regulated that feature is put on all user-generated social media platforms. Like I want to see on YouTube, I want to see on Reddit, I want to see on Instagram, I want to see on TikTok. Because what that then allows, I don't want to consume Tater Talk content, but there's going to be somebody there who's watching it to take him down. It allows that person to go do that work of like liking or commenting on factual mistakes, inaccuracies, blatant lies. And fine, will we change the minds of the people consuming the content? Maybe not. But I think for our kids, exposing them to the idea that there's a debate to be had, and this is not a de facto thing.
One-sided.
This is not, this perspective ignores facts. This perspective doesn't take into consideration outcomes, situations, scenarios, like just anything that makes it less likely that you're going to watch this and be like, this is my opinion too. And like, I think regulation's the only way we're going to get that kind of thing done. Because I don't think the companies want to do that. Because it goes against this idea of like organic content. It's like, I don't want my Instagram shouting at me that, this content's wrong or something,
Wrong. I mean, I would even see that even if we're taking it away from just people who have children, but just adults or young adults, right, themselves, 100%. Right? So it's like there is value in being able to critically consume content.
Yeah.
And I think that's a skill set that when we consume social media, it's not always like top of mind. So you're just kind of mindlessly scrolling, going at it.
It's also, so this is going to challenge me to find the source. There was another study I found that like the two age groups most susceptible to conspiracy theories and misinformation in social media are the youngest and the oldest. So we've talked about our parents and then WhatsApp forwards. Same thing.
Oh my
Same thing. Right? Like
forwards.
It's the same. My mother is still, and her friends are still, and her chats are still, and I'm like, it does my head in, but it is shaping her worldview.
Yes.
And interestingly, we recently found out, my mother, like a lot of Nigerian mums, is proudly Christian. But we recently found out that one of the preachers that she's very into, there was like a whole expose, a Me Too style expose on this individual on the BBC of all places. So like international, they needed journalistic integrity to a certain extent. I know they're not always there with it. So I had to side thread my siblings and I was like, yo, how do we share? Should we just forward it into the family chat? So it's just there like she does for us? Or like, how do we present this information to my mother? Because it's going to shatter her worldview. So we discussed it, and my older sister, being who she is, she was just like, I'm sending it now. Sent it to her. My mom was like, it's a conspiracy. It's a lie.
Always. It's a lie. They never want to acknowledge the truth. I'm like, you can't handle the image of whoever it is being tainted. And that's exactly what it is.
100%. It's like she's now so far down the perspective well that she's taken that this content has to be rejected. It can. And actually, I think this is also what's going to happen with AI. And this is why the tech is the supervillain. Because there'll come a point when there is so much momentum towards a perspective that anything contrary to that perspective is an outlier, and therefore it gets rejected. And so when we talk about people not being believed or voices not being heard, that's only going to get worse.
paper. What was it? What was it called?
Tech
Techno
optimists.
Top Optimist. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the manifesto.
Yep.
It's the statement of a viewpoint as fact.
Yeah. But then the
And
momentum.
if you go against, yes. Yeah, if you go against it, you are the outlier, and it just. Oh, what a world!
No, the tech is the supervillain. The tech is the supervillain. It's funny because I think about that a lot, about how I process my conscience at work, and and I think some people that there are different camps of people, and people are like, "That's all political. Just leave the politics at the door. Just do your job, right?" But I'm like, that's how we started this. That's how we got here, where we talked about, I'm building personalization engines. I'm not building polarization engines. Turns out personalization engines are polarization engines. I'm building an AI to make your job easier. I'm not trying to affect the jobs market. Turns out if you're a content person right now, there's like 8 out of 10 chance you've just been laid off in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
I was talking to an old colleague. She's been laid off for the second time in a year. And she's a content writer. So like the intent we have when we go into our work as people who work in tech, we do have to find a way to process unintended outcomes as well as foreseeable outcomes, right? And I think one of the things that when I consumed this, I was really reflecting that this article really affected me, because I was like, my nephews, my godson, like I got very in my feels with all my people. It starts to challenge you to be like, okay, what decision do I make tomorrow that says I'm not complicit in the next version of that, in like increasing that gap or that polarization or making it worse? And if all of us did a little bit of that, we might end up with better tech. But whilst we're still in this like, that my job, I just want to focus on my job. I'm just this kind of like blind thing.
Yeah.
We're going to make these dystopian futures real for our kids. And I think even if you're not a parent, that's the society you're aging into.
Yeah.
And
you're shaping you're shaping where you're going to spend your older age, right? Because the younger folks are the ones that are going to take care of you.
Right.
And what that looks like depends on the world you leave behind for them or leave for them to step into.
And you know me, I love a good popular culture reference. But this is what happened in The Handmaid's Tale. And for those who haven't watched the TV series or read the book, Mamuna, did you read the book at least? Okay. Hey, it's okay. Take deep breaths. So Margaret Atwood is, an incredible writer, maybe not the world's greatest literary author, but certainly somebody who was very prophetic. So she wrote this book in the 80s about this fictional state called Gilead, which was based in the US. So Gilead, talking about civil war last time, Gilead is a state that was developed after a civil exercise or scenario in the US, and an ultra-conservative group of people emerged. And it was precipitated by reducing birth rates, aka Korea. So with lower birth rates, a conservatism gave rise. And so Gilead became this state where, couples could essentially get a handmaid, these women who were fertile, because most women were no longer fertile. And handmaids were fertile, and then a family would acquire a handmaid in order to have a child. We're not going to go into the details of the abusive ways in which the children were made and the things that the handmaids had to go through. But there were certain things that were super familiar, like the wives were thinking that they were better than the handmaids, but ultimately they were victims of the same state. Like a wife who was found to be lying had a finger cut off. There were all these in the TV show. They kind of created flashbacks to before Gilead, which looked like the world we live in today, i.e. we progressed into Gilead. Typically when you see that kind of repressive culture, you think it's a historical thing. Gilead was actually a future state, right? And that's the other thing that's a warning sign. But there were older women who were in hiding, almost like a resistant faction, because they were single, had made their own money. And then Gilead basically made it impossible for a woman to have a bank account. So then their money was taken away from them and they had nothing, no agency. And they were kidnapping women from other countries to turn them into handmaids. And it became this, but they were also advocating for handmaids because it had increased their birth rate. And so other nations also experiencing lowering birth rates were like, maybe this handmaid experiment is a good thing. Anyway, I love The Handmaid's Tale. I love the questions it asks. I actually think all Gen Z boys should be made to read the book and study it in school and unpick the issues and consider what it would be like for their sister to be in a situation like that, because that's the kind of world that tater tots are advocating for. And it
So call them tater tots.
They
I
are
actually
tater
like to eat
tots.
tater tots.
And adult babies is spouting nonsense from this mal-educated, absolutely abusive, toxic male figure who is a criminal, by the way. Not that all crimes are equal, but anyway. So yeah, Handmaid's Tale.
But what's interesting, right, is that you have to, I think, in order to reverse in some way or to contribute to a more, I don't know, a cooler temperature in the pool, people have to people have to also get online and provide content that, again, comes to the middle, right? And so we have to be open to understanding what is being said, right? Why people are interested in the content that is being shared.
Yeah.
And then offer, I don't want to use alternative because that's like maybe too far to the other side, but like offer views that allow people to trek away from that far side to a middle, to maybe now say, okay, I can see both sides.
Yes.
And I understand how this could be bad. I understand how this may have some merits. I don't know. But I also understand this other side, and I can equally discern what is right for me, because that's what's missing today. That critical thinking component, like when we talk about our parents consuming content from WhatsApp, it's like they get like that constant shoot where they're like, yep, this is what's being said. This person is perfect. They say the right things always, whatever. And then they do something and it should change their perspective, but they're not comfortable dissecting that feeling of discomfort it creates for them, right?
Yeah.
And so they'd rather create and stay in that little house and say, okay, no, things are as they have always been. I'm not consuming that. We have to be okay with that discomfort. And I don't think that's where we exist today.
And I think, like, we've mentioned this before on the podcast, but as a engineering graduate and pro-STEM person, I am really grateful that I took English literature classes until I was 18 years old and I didn't enjoy writing essays. And this is why I went for a much more technical degree, but I had to debate perspectives. I had to apply critical thinking. When I look at the macro picture where we are, let's say these techno optimist billionaires who are funding schools or influencing politicians and towns and deciding what books exist in libraries and whether or not certain types of college courses attract scholarships. Like, these decisions impact people's exposure to critical thinking skills. And to me, the ideal technologist is somebody who can hold the discomfort. It's like these things, a bad person can do good things. A good person can do bad things. These things are not mutually exclusive ideas. The difficulty is navigating the reality of what that means. And those of us who can do that are more likely to come up with like good ideas and great safeguards. This binary idea where like, I'm a tech person with eng skills who can't apply critical reasoning means we're going to end up in Gilead.
Right, which ties those intended outcomes or the unintended outcomes, right?
Yes.
That you were speaking about. It's
unintended,
like, okay, I produce
foreseeable
products. Yes.
Foreseeable.
So we take a second
kind of data.
to say, okay,
yeah.
Yes. What is the impact? What is the future impact of this thing in the world? Not just, hey, I did a good job. My employer is happy. I shipped a thing. It's okay.
Yeah.
But what does that mean?
Especially because the cost of that thinking is probably about as much as like one extra workshop in the design process.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the further you go,
actually, that could be just part of your requirements.
Yeah. The further you go without taking that step, the harder it is to implement a change.
Yes.
And that's all we're asking for here. It's like, if, for all of us, we show up at work today and you're making a decision. It's like, there's actually an exercise. There's a really great ethical ethicist now. I think he's full-time. I'm going to shout out. His name is Kenneth Bold, but spelled the Welsh way. So we'll put that in the show notes. He's written a book. What's it called? Future Ethics. I absolutely love this book. So the book is specifically for people who are working in tech, designing future systems and processes around technology innovations. And he's the one who first introduced me to this idea of unintended but foreseeable consequences. The idea that if you paused for a second and thought about everything that could go wrong with what you're building, you will probably identify the majority of negative outcomes that can be prevented. But if you don't take that step, you're just going to walk into every bad outcome that there could be with what you're building. And so I, after reading that book, I was inspired to do this exercise that I've done occasionally at work, where we literally just brainstorm all of the things that could go wrong. And sometimes it's like sequential. It's like, oh, I'm designing a booking flow for a flight. Great. What could go wrong when you're entering your dates? Oops, you enter the wrong date. Okay, what happens next? What happens next? What happens next? And you basically follow it to the worst place. And then you say, which of these things can I do something about? Is it a confirmation screen? Is it extra words on the page? Is it to slow it down? Is it to make it big? And those decisions are cheap to make. Obviously, in like personalization and AI, it's a bit more expensive. But I genuinely think when you're a technologist, if you're writing code, if you're writing content, if you're designing experiences, the cost of pausing for that little bit just to do those kinds of exercises is marginal. It's negligent. It's nothing. The implications of not doing that, we are experiencing and future generations will experience. And it just scares the living shit out of me. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. Maybe we should start to send that book out to folks who work at like OpenAI and other companies.
Kenneth would be very grateful. I think he's doing a Fulbright scholarship at the moment. So he's pushing the message of ethics in technology and ways of applying it, not just like moral high ground opinions, but like everyday people doing simple things at work to try and nudge towards that kind of thinking. But yeah, I really love it. But we will put it in the show notes. Anyway, I hope we have sufficiently scared our listeners about Gen Alpha.
I think there's opportunities, right? I think one opportunity is for content creators. If you're out there and you happen to be listening to this, start to try to find ways to reach out to maybe your non-typical audience.
Yes.
I think for tech folks, pick up some books, Future Ethics.
Yes. There's a bunch of
try
others.
to think about those, intended outcomes or unintended outcomes, but that can be
foreseen,
actually thought through.
Yeah.
Parents.
Yes, please, parents. Do
Godspeed.
Parents. Godspeed, parents. If your kid gets an Apple Vision Pro, put that thing on your own head and use it and make sure you know. Like, do not let your kids just get tech that you do not understand.
And not understand. Yes.
I want an Apple Vision Pro, by the way, but that's another thing.
Have you seen the reviews on it?
I have seen the reviews, and the only thing that's stopping me from ordering one is the ludicrous price because
exactly. I'm like, for that price,
I know
it feels like it's not there.
I think it's there. I think I'm a sucker for the thoughtfulness and the ergonomics that Apple applies to its tech, and I'm gonna buy one at some point. But
no, you're not. Don't do it. Not yet. Just wait.
I'm waiting till it's cheaper because I cannot justify that price.
Wait for like another iteration of it, like till they fix some of like the rendering.
They will. But like my first iPhone was like the third iPhone. So I was still early by many people's terms.
Yeah, but
I didn't get Gen 1. Yes.
I feel like it's not an early price. It's not a early welcoming come one, come all price.
But it's also, they are needing more people to use it, the feedback, the insights learned from scaling.
And lower the price.
Yeah, but it's still too expensive. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a
hold on.
Whole other episode, Mamuna. So we're going to stop there.
Yes. Okay.
We've made this show for you, and we want to hear your stories. We have our combined 35 years experience in tech. We have an incredible bank of experts to call on. We are your safe space. So send us your tech challenges and we'll help you create some draft decisions through some real talk.
You've been listening to me, Mamuna Oladipo.
And me, Lola Oyelayo-Pearson.
Edited and produced by me, Michael Bussa, with theme music by 031 MASH.
Email us at help@lostintechpodcast.com or DM us at lostintechpod.